Doing research on volcanoes can be incredibly valuable to learn about possible future hazards, but just as important is communicating with the local communities and engaging with them, particularly for those who live close to volcanoes or on volcanic islands, for example. So I'm very glad today to be joined by Monique Johnson from the University of West Indies Seismic Research Centre. Hi there, Monique, how are you doing?
Hi, I'm fine, thank you.
Good. Thank you so much for joining us today here on VolcaKnowledge. Whereabouts are you joining from today?
I'm joining you from Trinidad.
Fantastic. How's the weather there?
Sunny, blue skies and everything.
So the complete opposites of what we have here in England. Good. So you are a project specialist at the UWI Seismic Research Centre. I was wondering if you could tell us a bit about your job role, but also your background, what it is that you do.
Okay, well, in terms of my background, I'm a geologist by training, profession, and basically at Seismic, I provide support to the various projects that we run here. Those can range from community engagement, education and outreach, and to more technical hazard related and risk understanding throughout the Eastern Caribbean islands, where we monitor the earthquakes, volcanoes, and also tsunami.
Yeah, so the Seismic Research Centre really covers a very, very wide range of things over many different countries and many different islands altogether. It must be a real challenge working across such essentially a large space but separated by so many people on different islands.
Yes, that's definitely one of our biggest challenges, trying to get to all of the territories. Because we are based in Trinidad. The center was established about 70 years ago, and in Trinidad, because we were not there was no volcanic risk, I suppose. So I guess they thought this would have been the safest place to put the center. But of course, that comes with the challenge of getting to the territories. But we kind of manage. That was kind of peaked during COVID as well, and trying to deal with an eruption. But we managed to get by.
Because you had the eruption of St. Vincent's, Lucifer St. Vincent in 2021, just a year into the pandemic, when I guess it was still at a height. So I know that was a real challenge for many people working on the ground, and also further away, as you say, maybe back at the main center in Trinidad.
Yes, yeah. But
so you said you have a geology background. So what brought you into working with the Seismic Research Centre?
well, originally I was working in a more coastal related field, looking at coastal hazards and the impact of uh, hazards in the coastline. But I was working a lot with communities and doing hazard maps and getting them to understand hazard maps. And I also kind of ventured into understanding tsunamis and prehistoric tsunamis and mapping those in the Caribbean. And that's kind of what got me into seismic, because there was a project for tsunami awareness and public education that Seismic had started with USAID to do some public education tools for the Eastern Caribbean on tsunamis. So that's how I started at Seismic, and I kind of moved in and out of projects, and then I started managing the Volcano Ready project, which started in 2018, and it was targeting communities in St. Vincent to basically help them prepare for the impact of an eruption, and also for other natural hazards. So that is basically how I kind of got into the field of working with communities and understanding community knowledge and engagement for volcanic hazards and on volcanic islands.
So with the Volcano Ready project only starting in 2018, it's really quite a coincidence that, of course, then the volcano started erupting again in only 2020, so just a year and a half to 2 years after that project started. But prior to that, there hadn't been an eruption since 1979. So I guess was there still quite a gap in almost catching people up, whether if it was people who are much older and had experienced that past eruption, but are then much younger generations who had never experienced something on the island?
Yes, and definitely. I mean, that would have been the last eruption in Saint Vincent, but not necessarily in the Caribbean because we also had Montserrat
Mhm.
in the 90s. But I think the memory it was still it was always present on the island, and I guess through the work of Seismic as well and projects like Streva, there had been a lot of work to kind of remind people about the presence of the volcano and document people's experiences so that that story always remained fresh in people's mind. So it's kind of like a balance of that it basically being a part of people's lives in St. Vincent, that they live on a volcanic island. The volcano, it's visible to a lot of the community so that they
Mhm.
know that it's there. But also there were a lot of efforts to kind of document those stories and those experiences, and which led up to the Volcano Ready project, and that kind of was a opportune time for us to share a lot of the material that we would have had in the archives and whatnot, and all of the work that would have went into um, documenting people's experiences and the history of volcanic activity in the island. So that project definitely gave us a boost, I think, in
Mm.
reminding people about the impact of the volcano in the past. So
Okay, so you were actively bringing that history back, not just from, say, more recent eruptions in the 70s, but also further back through the 18 and 19 and 1800s as well, I guess. So looking more back to the history.
yes, well, there were some really there was a fantastic archive of the 1902 eruption that had been documented through photographs um, by Tempest Anderson, and there were these were made available to Seismic, and through the project we were able to have we hosted an exhibition, like a photography exhibition, where we shared a lot of those photos. So I think for me it was really important that people in St. Vincent had access to this material and to these photographs that basically documented their landscape and their experiences. So that photo exhibition was kind of like the first or one of the big engagement activities that we had, and we also it also gave us the opportunity to share some of the archival photographs from Seismic during the 79 eruption. So we kind of had 1902 and then 79, and
Okay.
mhm. And I think that had quite a positive impact. It was held in Kingstown, and the feedback was very positive. People were happy to have be able to see these pictures, and you know, it kind of would have give them a different
Yeah.
thought process or jarred something, some level of emotion and connection to the volcano.
Yes, I was going to say, did you also have people sharing their own experiences from some of the people on the island who had experienced that 79 eruption?
Yes, definitely. Anytime we have any kind of engagement activities, and in the Volcano Ready project, we had a lot of community engagement spaces. So we had a lot of exhibitions, and we would have community meetings. There was a lot of activities dedicated to building preparedness, building community response teams, and in all of these spaces we would have we all of these activities we would create spaces where people could come up and share their stories and their experiences and voice how the volcano had impacted them or their family, and what history they can recall, and how those stories have changed for them or the way that they relate to the volcano.
Yeah, and I guess it just enriches the project more and more. The more people that involve that, and maybe you start involving that in your own community outreach, because one story told to you is a story that can be shared on elsewhere. So I guess it just passively grew and grew as well.
Yes, very much so, and it kind of helped us to evolve our method for engaging with people in the communities, where we were also we go out in these communities, and we take information to them, and we try to share and get them sharing stories, and it becomes a two-way communication where we learn so much from these communities and their experiences. It really helps us to understand the way people perceive risk and relate to the volcano, and how we can improve the way we communicate with them. So it kind of went from having the eruption in 1902 documented in one very by one person, to 79, where you would have the SRC, and we had some photographs from Caribbean people, and then now to this experience in through the over the last few years, with people sharing their own experiences, and that being the means of talking about the volcano and educating people about the volcano, and just getting them to reflect on what it means to live on a volcanic island. So, and we're kind of learning and growing in that way, and understanding the importance of community knowledge, from a scientific standpoint, and the kind of leveling the playing field, so to speak, in terms of really valuing people's experience and knowledge when it comes to volcanic risk.
Yes, exactly. And I guess with then the eruption from December 2020 with the new dome forming, and then of course the explosive eruption from April 2021 onwards, I guess Volcano Ready was still going on at that point, but it obviously had to completely evolve, or did it kind of stop for a while and change its direction and objectives? But I guess you were actively using that knowledge that had been gained and hoping that people were taking on the lessons that they'd only recently learnt about as well.
Yes, indeed. The project definitely had to adapt, and what's the trendy word, pivot,
Yeah.
with this pandemic. Yeah, luckily, we did conclude most of the community engagement activities. We had a few, like we wanted to take the exhibition around to the other community. It was meant to be a traveling exhibition, but with COVID, we had to basically we couldn't do any of the community engagements, and we kind of took to doing more digital tools for sharing information. So we had like the animated poem, and we had a series of explainer videos that we produced about and other geological hazards. And then when the eruption started, of course, the project was able to support kind of boosting of our monitoring system, because we really needed to get our eyes on the volcano. So it was supportive of that. And then when the explosive phase um, commenced and ended, we were able to provide some response support and relief supplies. So it kind of was very timely, and I think it was
Yeah, so
supportive of quite a range of activities related to the volcano, from the community to the monitoring to the response, and also for relief. So
yes, you and your team must have had to been very adaptable and flexible throughout a pandemic and then an eruption as well. But as you say, how coincidental and almost lucky that this project was so fresh in people's minds leading up to this event. I imagine it helped particularly communities who weren't used to volcanic eruptions as such immensely.
yes, well, I think the volcano kind of affected the entire island. So
Mm.
being a small island, it's hard for you to separate yourself from the volcano, and that impact. So I think, yeah, definitely all of the work that led up to Volcano Ready, with Striva, and the capturing of people's stories, and it definitely made an impact in the way that people responded in this eruption.
Yes, and you mentioned something about an animated poem. What exactly was that as part of the
Uh,
project?
it was a poem written by a gentleman called, no, he goes by the name Tajo. His name is Maxwell Phillips Tajo, from Fancy, and he wrote this poem almost in like less than a day when we launched the Volcano Ready project. this would have been 2018 or early 2019. And he recited it at the launch event that we had, ceremony. And of course, when we heard it, we were like, oh my goodness, this is. And it basically recounts his experience during 79 when he was a young boy, and talking about his grandmother waking him up and experiencing the
Right.
ash and the evacuation. So it was a really powerful story that he tells, and we partnered with an animation studio to produce an animation of the poem. It's been really well received, and yeah.
Incredible, and something so personal as well to be able to share. I guess it's one thing writing a poem, taking on other people's experiences, or just using the landscape and things going on around you to influence what you write. But to be able to put your own personal experience, particularly something like that, which must have been maybe, well, possibly traumatic, but maybe quite, well, maybe quite harrowing, particularly as a young child, to
Mhm.
bring back some of those memories and experiences.
Yes, and it kind of reinforces the way, that people's stories and their narratives it was so powerful to connect with people. Like, people really were able to, there were certain elements when he mentions places, and like, he kind of puts some comical parts into it, the whole experience. So
Good, good. Yeah, there's a
that
nice
was
balance.
really, yeah.
And so even then after the eruption, so of course the Volcano Ready project, as you say, had kind of finished its objectives and was wrapping up,
Mhm.
but there were other projects that followed from that, following the actual eruption itself. So one was, you mentioned, called Changing Landscapes. I wonder if you could tell us a bit about that project.
Well, so Changing Landscapes was basically a recovery project that started in October or September, October, after the eruption in 2020. And it was a community based project again. And it was sort of designed to understand better what were the issues that were affecting the communities in the northeastern part of the island, which would have been most severely impacted by the eruption. These would have been communities that would have had to evacuate in the red zone. And so one of the sort of extensive hazards, it was born out of the Risk at Margins project, which looked at extensive hazards that continue long after the eruption is over. And so the lahars was one of the main issues that people
Hmm.
were facing, basically because of the physical landscape in that area. There's one main coastal road that connects the south to the north, and it's basically cut by river valleys. Each community is dissected by a river, a main river channel. And when it rains, these rivers come down and it's flooded and the road is blocked, and they are either isolated in the north or they can't get home. And this would have happened like on many occasions, like almost every month, every time there's heavy rainfall. So we really wanted to support the communities in their return and also in their recovery, um, from a social perspective, but also try to understand better how these rivers were changing and responding to rainfall, but in a way that we can understand this together with the communities. So it started basically with a citizen science methodology,
Hmm.
where we worked with them to identify areas that we can situate rain gauges for measuring and understanding the rainfall that's happening in the mountain, and that's basically triggering these floods. Um, and it was also an opportunity for them to, understand how the data is collected, and take responsibility for these, sensors. And to couple that, we ran a photography program, like a series of workshops, which was led by local photographers and mentors, and they were provided with cameras as a means of documenting the changes in their landscape, both physically and socially. So it gave them an opportunity to share a shared narrative, so to speak, of what it's like coming back home after an eruption and building back, and moving on, moving forward and recovering. And at the end of that, we had an exhibition on the
Oh, wow.
anniversary of the eruption, which basically provided them with a platform to share their work and whatever narrative they wanted to share with their community. And at the beginning, we asked them, who do you want to share your stories with? Who do you want to tell this to? And the priority was to tell people in the south, in the green zone, what it's like to come from the red zone. So there was an astounding sense of pride and community. Being from the north, they also identify as indigenous communities, and feel largely marginalized. All of this exists within a very political landscape. So it was a great opportunity for them to kind of embrace their agency for speaking about issues that they wanted to, and showing people, how beautiful their life is. And the photographs were just stunning and breathtaking, because it's probably one of the most beautiful places, as much as it is one of the most dangerous places to live.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so unfortunately, sometimes those things do go hand in hand. But I guess this also really showcased their resilience to
Yeah.
living as close to nature and nature's processes as possible. And as you say, being able to provide those communities as a way to actively engage in citizen science by not just kind of documenting, their own experiences, but taking photos through time of their own landscape and their own livelihoods and their own backyards changing on a daily basis is really, really quite powerful.
Yes. Yeah. And there was some really there was a nice a very interesting cross section of themes that came out of in their narratives. There was um, basically them sharing the secret spots, and the fountain of youth in the water and whatnot, and then their indigenous culture and the foods that they pride themselves in, and um, sharing also the challenges that they face, with the lahars in the rivers, and building back and dealing with the ash, the quantity of ash that they had to remove, and so it was quite a well balanced, I think, and a nice cross section of stories and experiences that was shared throughout. So, and it was a
Yes.
really beautiful community event as well, where they all, after this eruption, and everyone had been so traumatized, I would say, in this experience, that they had a space to kind of come together again and share. And there was, like, dancing and storytelling and poems and all of that. So,
Yeah. Oh, well, what a wonderful indirect way to re-engage different communities on the island itself through, as you say, through going something quite traumatic, but to be able to take that experience and then bring it back to everybody else, as you say, in different areas of the island for from also an educational perspective for them, I guess, as well, for those living in the green zone. Sounds really, really
mhm.
a really special project. And I guess
Yeah.
it's something that's not always thought about. You talked about, how these floods are bringing material that's erupted from pyroclastic flows in the lahars, and it's remobilizing it and taking it back down the slopes and flooding. Is that kind of what the issue is there?
Yes, yes, definitely. Changing the landscape of the what would have originally been like dry rivers, seasonal rivers. Yeah, they would have been reactivated every time there was rainfall, and a lot of material coming down. In the beginning, these would have been like really large boulders and a like larger mass. But over time, we're seeing the change now, where there's a lot more ash and more water coming through. So all of
Okay, so
that
is
is
that still ongoing then? That in terms of that people documenting those landscapes?
oh yes, yes, yeah.
Oh wow.
It's well, we are trying to keep the momentum.
Hmm.
So we will be returning to do a new project this time, but with the same group, to try and keep them engaged and continue the learning process. We also have to discuss. I'm so sorry. We also have to. I don't even know what this. Yes, so and it's also a lot of learning for us as well, looking at the data for the that we collect with the rain gauges,
Yeah.
and sort of sharing that information with them, and seeing what they might take away from it, and it can be of use to them, and to us as well. So just trying to keep that two-way communication
So
throughout.
you're going to be actively returning to the field soon then to re-engage with that with those communities.
Yes, so we're going to be running another series of workshops, but this time we'll be looking at film and documentary storytelling.
Okay.
Um, yeah. So, and at the same time, we'll be revisiting all of the re-engaged sites, and working with the data and seeing how we can learn together.
Yeah, I guess now that you've had enough time has elapsed where there's more to talk about for something like a mini docuseries and filming rather than the initial data right after the eruption. You can now people can look back through time and they can understand how things might have changed and how,
Hmm.
as you say, maybe those changes are slowing down, but they're still happening at the same time.
Yes, definitely. Hmm.
Yes, really, really. So do you say that it's not something that people always think about in terms of volcanic hazards, or at least those who maybe don't live on or close to volcanoes, is that even after an eruption, there is still potential risk, and a lot of those are from these kinds of phenomena, remobilizing ash through water or even wind in some cases. So it's a really good opportunity not just to educate the local communities, but I imagine it's stuff that you'll be able to spread throughout the Eastern Caribbean as well for other islands that are volcanic as well.
Yes, that definitely, and that's one of the objectives, so to speak, in this new project that we're starting. It's how we can bring stories from one place to another, because we have Montserrat, which would have also experienced a recent eruption, and there's a lot of work to engage with communities there. And then we also have places like Dominica and St. Lucia, where the volcanic landscape is very active, and we want to do the same kind of storytelling and engagement with these communities. So it's finding ways to connect the communities, and seeing how their experiences can be used, or told and carried across the islands, in a way that's meaningful and engaging for
Yeah,
them.
very, very, very valuable forms of outreach and engagement. And I know as well that you do a lot over social media as well, so that beyond the Eastern Caribbean as well, there's opportunities to show what you do. And I imagine, well, I know for a fact that there are many communities out there that are very impressed with the work that you do, considering the challenges you have, as we mentioned before, working between different islands in eruption during a pandemic. I think there's some really incredible, valuable work that's been done by yourself and your team out there.
Yes, and incredible work done by these people that continue to exist and persist and make beautiful life on these, in despite the experiences that they have. And yes, we definitely have an amazing outreach team at Seismic, and the dedicated staff. It's they
Yeah,
are they are a
very
pleasure to work with.
good, good, very, very special team.
Hmm.
But another project that I know you've also been involved in is now, say, talking to the younger generation and talking about and their experiences and their stories. So I was wondering if you could tell me a bit about that project you've been working on as well.
Right. Oh, this is a volcano in my backyard. Yes.
Yes.
That kind of came about incidentally. Working with the changing landscapes and spending time in the communities. There was a teacher as part of the changing landscapes group, and spending time in the community, particularly in Fancy, which is the last community in the north at the end of the road, where the children are very warm, and I would spend a lot of time, after we have our project activities, we would go down to the field and play football with them and whatever.
Mm.
And I think for me, there had been a lot of focus on recovery projects that were targeting people's livelihoods, naturally, as these needed to be prioritized. But I wanted to find a way to engage with the children. And I was very cognizant or always considering what their experiences might have been like, having to be evacuated and they weren't able to go to school, move out of home, and then come back to this community and see, that whole experience. I can't imagine what that must have been like for a child. So I wanted to do something with them, basically trying to get their story and see how they might have interpreted this event of a volcanic eruption. And so it was kind of an experiment, more or less, working with a small group of children and working with their teacher and also Tajo again, the poet, who
Oh,
basically
yes.
led them along, kind of guided them along the way of developing a story, which we turned into stop motion animation, something that we had never done before.
Fantastic.
So we got them to create all of the art pieces, all of the drawings, and to voice they recorded the story as well, which was very animated in and of itself. And from that, I think they enjoy the process immensely, and I think as a priority for me, that was very important. That whole and through all of the projects as well. Yes, we have to consider the power of the audience, and the audience holds a lot of power. But the people, to me, that are creating this work in the experience of telling the story, I think that process is what can be very powerful and very healing for them. So it was a pleasure and something that we hope to do again.
Incredible. As you say, the number of things you managed to involve in essentially such a very small, short project, but so impactful on young lives to be able to engage them, not just hearing their stories, but in doing so, they had an artistic outlet. They learned skills for voicing over, doing stop motion, creating their own artwork for it. So I guess we shouldn't be surprised if in 10 years' time there's a surge of filmmakers coming out of St. Vincent.
Yes, we hope so. We hope so. And there are some amazing, very talented and dedicated filmmakers there that we're really looking forward to working with
Mm.
in at the end of this month. And there is also a local film festival, the Hairuna Film Festival, which is based in St. Vincent. So anything that's produced under this next project will be showcased at the film festival in St. Vincent. So we're really excited about the possibilities there.
Fantastic. Have the children themselves seen the final outputs of their artwork and their hard work?
Yes, they have. They have through their teacher, but we're still dreaming. At the end of this, we really the next step for me would to have like a really nice community film screening of everything that's been produced. So we're gonna have to try and find some support for that one to make it happen. So I'll put it out there. It's gonna happen. So the next
Fantastic.
one.
You said that I'm so impressed at like just the range of the different things that you do across the islands and within individual communities, and such a range. You said it perfectly before. You have to. There's certain things you have to prioritize at a time based on what the risks are, what the hazards, what those priorities need to be in terms of protecting livelihoods, protecting environments or the economy, but then making sure you're not forgetting about those who also have stories to tell, and making sure that we're engaging with them as well. So it's really, really impressive that you're doing that work. But something as well is that, of course, along the way, you've had your own personal experiences. So I was wondering if there's any particular memory, you have a particular volcanic moment, if that's through work or through travel, that always sticks in your mind, even if it's not just one. I'm sure you have plenty.
Yes, I think I have a dilemma, so to speak. The I could share maybe two experiences that have really stuck with me. The first one, from a physical landscape point of view, I think I wasn't in St. Vincent during the explosive parts of the eruption, but I did visit in February, like 2 months before. to assist the team that was installing some of the equipment on the crater, and that we made one trip on the leeward side of the island up to the crater to put in some instruments. And I think just getting to the top, that's when they had the second dome in the crater. So that view of seeing the old 79 dome that I would have seen many times, and then seeing this new monstrosity that had just come up in a month or so. Like there, we would have seen pictures of it, but to actually see it in in real
Yeah.
life, real time, you really lose your sense of scale when you're up there. Like you could not, like you can't imagine what it might, how how small you feel,
Yes, so it's very
insignificant.
different, say, looking on a photograph that's this big
Hmm.
versus actually seeing the full scale of the crater and that new dome itself.
Yes, so that was one memorable sight that was captured in my hard drive. Yeah, but it's for me, connecting with people is always had a huge impact on what I do, and really drives me to continue doing this work and going back to these places and connect and I think the exhibition that we had last year, when we were setting up that exhibition, when there were some women that we had worked with that they were helping us clean up the area, and they were some of the photographs were of them doing work cleaning cassava, doing cleaning, making the traditional foods, and they came and I was showing them the pictures. And when they picked up the picture and she saw herself in the picture, she was so shocked to see. She was like, Is that me?" And she started to laugh. Like she was so happy, and her emotion was so genuine. It really moved me, seeing the way that she reacted to having her picture taken and knowing that it was going to be displayed as part of the exhibition. I think that was something that I never forgot, and I never want to take for granted. Um, Taking that back to people. So that was something. I mean, um, there was also, one of the participants in the Changing Landscapes group, when she went up on stage and she gave a speech. Basically, she delivered a very powerful message to the Prime Minister that required him to respond to her. And I think that moment as well, she had shown me her speech before, and that bit she didn't include. Like she was so
Oh,
determined to deliver that message, and I just felt so moved by her courage and her recognition of her agency in that moment. I think that kind of hit the nail on the head. Like, okay, this is this is making sense at
yeah,
some level.
this is real. These are people's lives and
Hmm.
livelihoods and their
Yeah.
their experiences. Well, what? Thank you so much for sharing those. What an amazing array of things you've taken on. Say in the field you do, you don't just live your own experiences through this. You take on so many other people's lives and their experiences and their emotions and feelings. As you say, it can be probably very challenging, but also very very rewarding. And much of this will stick with you.
Yes, definitely. It changes who I am. It changes my perspective all the time, and it's helped me to grow and see what's really important, I think.
Yeah, well, I think that's also unfortunate. We'll come to the end, but I think that's a beautiful sentiment to end on as well. So thank you so much for joining us to talk about this today, and I wish you best of luck in your future field work. And I know that I'll be looking out to what will come as well. I will add some links for all the things we've talked about, so people can look at these projects as well. I'm sure people will be very keen to see the stop motion volcano in my backyard themselves. It's a really, really fantastic piece of artwork. I beamed the first time I saw it. So we'll definitely share those with others as well. So thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for joining us today, Monique.
And thank you for the opportunity to listen and share, and your very great questioning and all of that. Yes, but I'm looking forward to sharing more. There's a very nice social media information, and the Changing Landscapes group also has their own Instagram that they're managing, and so we'll be sharing more of what's to come. Thank
Fantastic.
you.
Well, I'll make sure we have all of those channels ready for people who are watching and listening. So thank you everybody for joining us today for this episode of VolcaKnowledge, and thank you once again to Monique Johnson from the University of West Indies Seismic Research Centre.
All right, take care.